The air inside the forward operating base was thick with dust and the sharp, lingering scent of gun oil. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale, unforgiving glow across the briefing room. A dozen Navy SEALs sat shoulder to shoulder around the battered steel table, their faces set in the hardened expressions of men who had seen too much and were prepared to see more. Some fiddled with their gear, tightening straps or checking bolts on their rifles. Others simply stared ahead, quiet, conserving energy for what was to come. At the head of the table stood Commander Harlan, his jaw tight, eyes shadowed from too many sleepless nights. He tapped a laser pointer against a laminated map spread across the wall. The red circle drawn on it was ugly, an angry blotch in the center of Afghanistan's unforgiving mountains. "This valley," Harlan began, his voice clipped, "isn't just a stretch of rock and dust. It's a choke point. Every supply line that moves through here is under constant threat. In the last month, 3 convoys have been ambushed. 2 of them never made it out. Casualties: 21 Americans, 6 Allied forces. Sniper fire, coordinated, precise." The men listened in silence. They had heard similar numbers before, but something in the commander's tone made these ones heavier. He clicked the pointer again, highlighting ridgelines and shadowed caves. "The enemy isn't just harassing. They're hunting. Whoever is running these ambushes knows how we move, knows how we think. Which means," he paused, letting the weight sink in, "we're dealing with someone trained. Someone who doesn't miss." A low murmur passed around the table. Enemy snipers were bad enough. Trained ones were killers who could choke the life out of an entire mission before it even started. "This," Harlan continued, pointing again, "is where you go in. Intelligence believes the shooters are using these ridges and these caves. We've got drones in the air, but they're not catching much. Whoever's up there knows how to stay invisible." The men leaned forward, studying the routes, already calculating angles of attack, fallback plans, escape corridors. And the room shifted. Eyes moved not to the commander, but to the far corner. Sitting apart from the others, half in shadow, was a figure who seemed carved from silence itself. He wore the same fatigues, the same patch, the same weight of war etched into his shoulders. But something about him set him apart. He was lean, almost wiry, with a face weathered beyond his years. His eyes, however, were different. They didn't dart around the room like the others. They didn't blink under the fluorescent light. They were fixed cold, precise, like scopes aimed at something only he could see. He was the ghost. No one knew his real name. Maybe it was written somewhere in a sealed personnel file buried in the Pentagon. But among the SEALs, he was only known by the legend whispered between deployments. Some said he had racked up more confirmed kills than any other sniper in recent history. Others claimed he had been pulled from some secret program, trained outside the boundaries of standard military doctrine. A few even joked he wasn't human at all, that he simply appeared where death was needed, then disappeared without a sound. He rarely spoke. When he did, his voice was low, measured, carrying no trace of ego. To most, he was unnerving. To others, he was a guardian, a shadow on their side of the fight. Tonight, though, he said nothing. He simply sat, listening, hands folded on his rifle case. Harlan's eyes lingered on him for a fraction longer than the others, before continuing. "You're moving at first light. 2 fire teams. Standard loadout. But remember this. They'll be waiting. They'll hear you before they see you. And when they do..." He let the sentence trail off. He didn't need to finish it. They all knew what sniper fire did to unprotected men in open terrain. The ghost leaned forward slightly, his gaze tracing the ridgelines on the map. He didn't take notes. He didn't need to. Every contour, every shadow, every potential hide was already locked in his mind. One of the SEALs, a broad-shouldered man named Torres finally broke the silence. "Sir, with all due respect, if these guys are that good, why send us in without air support? Why not level the ridges and be done with it?" The commander's lips pressed into a thin line. "Because this valley isn't just rocks. It's where civilians live. Families. Farmers. You want to bomb it flat, you'll kill them too. And then you'll make more enemies than you take out. We don't fight that way. Not here. Not ever." Torres nodded reluctantly, falling back into silence. The point had been made. The commander turned his attention back to the ghost. "Sniper overwatch is your call. You see something, you handle it. But listen to me, and listen carefully." His voice hardened, cutting through the room like a blade. "You don't fire unless I give the order. We're not here to light up the valley. We're here to secure it. Clear?" The ghost's eyes met his. No nod, no words. Just that quiet, steady stare. For a moment, Harlan seemed unsettled. Then he looked away, finishing the briefing with coordinates, frequencies, and contingencies. When the men finally rose to gear up, the ghost remained seated for a while longer. He slid the case across his lap and opened it. Inside lay a rifle unlike any of the others customized, worn from use, but meticulously maintained. The scope gleamed under the buzzing light. Every part of it was cared for like a priest tends to holy relics. He ran a cloth over the barrel, checked the chamber, adjusted the scope. The motions were slow, ritualistic. For the ghost, this wasn't preparation. It was communion. The weapon wasn't a tool. It was an extension of him. Outside, the night stretched quiet and unforgiving. The valley waited, patient and hungry. Somewhere in those ridges, another sniper was watching the same stars, cleaning his own rifle, readying for tomorrow's hunt. The men joked as they packed, their laughter strained but necessary. Fear was a constant, and humor was how they dulled its edge. But the ghost carried no such defense. He wore silence like armor. When the lights finally dimmed, and the team caught what little rest they could, he remained awake, seated by the window, rifle across his lap. His eyes never closed. The mission would begin at dawn. And in the valley, someone was already waiting to kill them. The ghost knew what was coming. He also knew this. When the bullets started flying, orders would mean nothing. Only instinct would matter. And his instinct had never failed him. The first light of dawn washed over the jagged Afghan mountains, painting the ridgelines in shades of gray and gold. The valley below seemed still, almost serene, as though war had never touched it. But the SEALs knew better. Silence was never peace in this place. Silence meant someone was watching. The team moved in a staggered column, boots crunching against loose gravel. Their gear rattled softly, each sound magnified by the oppressive quiet. Every man was alert, eyes scanning ridges and shadows, fingers resting near triggers. The ghost trailed slightly behind, his rifle slung across his chest, steps unnervingly light. The valley narrowed into a natural funnel, walls climbing high on either side. From above, the team looked like ants marching into a trap. Commander Harlan paused at a hand signal, crouching low. He raised his binoculars and studied the ridges. Nothing. No movement. No glint of glass. Just stillness. Too quiet, Torres muttered under his breath. The ghost's eyes swept across the terrain with unsettling calm. To the others, the mountains looked like rock. To him, they looked like 100 possible hideout sniper nests, kill zones, places where death could lie in wait. His breathing slowed, his mind cataloging each shadow. The team pressed forward. Their formation was tight, but not rigid, moving like water around boulders and brush. Radios clicked softly with coded whispers, but no unnecessary words were spoken. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows. That was when it happened. The first shot came from nowhere. A sharp crack split the air, followed by the angry hiss of a round tearing past Torres's helmet. He threw himself flat against the dirt, adrenaline surging. Contact. Sniper fire. Chaos erupted. Bullets slammed into rock around them, sharp metallic pings echoing off stone. Dust kicked up where rounds chewed into the ground. The SEALs scrambled for cover, pressed low behind jagged outcroppings. Who's firing? From where? One man whispered hoarsely into his mic. But there was no answer. No one had seen the muzzle flash. No one had spotted the shooter. The shots seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Another round screamed overhead, closer this time. The team was pinned, unable to move forward or retreat without exposing themselves. The valley had become a cage, and the sniper held the key. Commander Harlan hissed orders through clenched teeth. Stay down. Don't expose yourselves. Eyes on the ridges. His voice was steady, but his jaw was tight. He knew one wrong move could mean a body bag. The SEALs tried to trace the origin, scanning ridge after ridge. Every rock, every shadow looked like it could hide death. Sweat beaded on foreheads beneath helmets. Their heartbeats pounded louder than the distant echo of shots. Another round struck inches from Ramirez's boot, spraying stone chips into his leg. He bit back a curse, pulling tighter against the rock. Who's firing? Torres hissed again, more desperate this time. His words weren't just a question. They were fear made audible. The ghost hadn't moved. While the others ducked and cursed, his body was unnaturally still, his face expressionless. He lay prone, his rifle angled against a flat rock. His eyes, steady and unblinking, scanned the ridges like a predator studying prey. Through his scope, the world narrowed. Dust trails, faint heat distortions, the unnatural stillness of a patch of shadow, all of it spoke to him. He ignored the commander's hand signal ordering him to hold. He ignored the voices crackling over comms. To him, the sniper wasn't invisible. He was careless. Just not careless enough for anyone else to see. Ghost, Harlan barked low, his tone edged with warning. Do not engage. That's an order. The ghost didn't answer. He didn't even blink. The others glanced toward him, half expecting him to listen, half hoping he wouldn't. The ghost had earned his legend not by following rules, but by saving lives when rules failed. Another round screamed overhead, slamming into the rock wall behind them. Chips of stone rained down on the team, gritty against their teeth and eyes. Through the ghost's scope, something flickered so faint no one else could have seen it. A flash of light. The reflection of glass, just for a heartbeat, against the morning sun. The ghost exhaled slowly, the breath leaving him like the release of a coiled spring. The team was still whispering frantic questions, searching blindly. Who's firing? From where? But the ghost had already answered. He just hadn't said it aloud. His finger curled around the trigger, steady, controlled. The rifle cracked once, a thunderous roar against the valley walls. For half a heartbeat, nothing changed. Then a scream echoed across the rocks, high-pitched and raw. The gunfire ceased. Silence swept back over the valley, heavy and absolute. The SEALs froze, stunned. The unseen shooter had been flesh and blood after all. The ghost adjusted his scope, searching again, his face unreadable. For him, the fight wasn't over. There was always another. The others slowly lifted their heads, unsure if it was safe to move. Torres exhaled hard, shaking his head. Son of a bitch. He found him. No one asked how. They didn't need to. Commander Harlan clenched his jaw, torn between anger and relief. The ghost had ignored orders. He had acted alone. But without that defiance, someone in his unit might already be bleeding out. The men whispered softly, voices low, disbelieving. Who's firing? From where? The phrase was no longer a question. It was becoming a kind of awe, a grudging recognition of the silent figure at their side. The ghost said nothing. He never did. His rifle smoked faintly, the echo of the shot still rolling across the valley. And in the silence that followed, one truth hung heavier than the rest. The valley wasn't empty. Not yet. Somewhere out there, another set of eyes was watching. Another trigger finger was waiting. The ambush wasn't finished, and the ghost knew it. The valley held its breath. For several seconds after the ghost's shot rang out, there was only silence, the kind that made men feel smaller than dust beneath the towering ridges. The seals hugged the ground, listening, waiting for more rounds to tear into them. Nothing came. Just the faint whisper of the wind running its fingers across the rocks. Target down, Ramirez muttered into his mic, voice shaking slightly. Confirm it, Commander Harlan ordered, his tone flat, but his eyes cut toward the ghost. The sniper didn't move. He lay prone, sheet pressed to the stock of his rifle, scope sweeping methodically across the ridgeline. His breathing was so calm it was almost unnatural, as though the gunfire had steadied him instead of rattling him. The others stole quick glances at him. Some wanted to believe the fight was over. That one shot had ended the threat. But the ghost's stillness said otherwise. He hadn't lowered his weapon. He hadn't blinked. He hadn't even twitched when Harlan's voice growled again. Ghost, I said, confirm. Nothing. Just that same unnerving focus. Harlan gritted his teeth. Orders mattered. Discipline mattered. A team only survived in hell if every man moved as one, obeying the chain of command. But the ghost seemed to exist outside of all that. He was there, and not there. A shadow obeying instincts rather than leaders. Then the valley answered. A crack split the air. Stone splinters exploded inches from Kowalski's helmet, showering him with grit. He swore loudly, dragging himself deeper behind cover. Another round hissed into the dirt where Torres had been seconds earlier. Second shooter. Different angle. Ramirez shouted. Bettine flattened again, hearts pounding. The relief they'd felt seconds ago vanished like smoke. They weren't out of it. They were still prey. Harlan's voice barked commands. Eyes up, find him. Sectors, damn it. But the ridges stretched on endlessly, jagged rocks and shadows blending into one another. Finding a sniper hidden among them was like finding a single grain of sand on the beach. Where the hell is he? Torres hissed. No one answered, except the ghost. He shifted slightly, his rifle sliding across the rock like water over stone. His movements were precise, economical, almost mechanical. Through his scope, the ridgeline became a puzzle, each angle another piece. He looked for the telltale signs others missed. A shape too smooth against rough stone, a shadow that didn't belong, the faint ripple of fabric stirred by the morning breeze. Another round cracked, biting into the dirt a foot from Ramirez's boot. The man cursed, pressing tighter against the earth. Ghost, Harlan's voice was hard, commanding. Hold your fire. I repeat, do not. The sniper didn't hear him. Or maybe he did, but chose not to listen. His finger rested on the trigger guard, not yet tightening. His breathing slowed even further, each inhale drawn with the precision of a metronome. Through the scope, there it was. A flicker, barely perceptible. A sliver of sunlight reflecting for a heartbeat, betraying the hidden shooter's glass eye. The ghost's heartbeat didn't quicken. If anything, it slowed. Time stretched thin, every sound in the valley muffled, except for the rhythm of his own lungs. The commander's voice rasped in his earpiece. "Ghost, do not engage." He ignored it. The world narrowed to crosshairs, and a shadow barely visible against rock. He knew the shot. He knew the distance, the angle, the wind. His mind had already solved the equation before his muscles moved. The trigger broke with the clean inevitability of a guillotine. The rifle cracked, echoing down the valley. For a moment, nothing. Then movement. A body toppled backward from its perch high above, limbs flailing as it tumbled across stone. A rifle clattered after it, bouncing down into the ravine below. The ghost remained still, scope tracking until the figure disappeared from view. Only then did he exhale slowly, lowering his cheek slightly from the stock. The SEAL stared. The second shooter was gone. He had been there, invisible, deadly, and now he was nothing more than a lifeless shape at the bottom of the ravine. Torres let out a long breath. Holy! He cut himself off, shaking his head. Ramirez pressed his helmet against the rock, eyes shut tight for a second. Relief was dangerous. It could kill faster than a bullet, but for a heartbeat, he allowed himself to feel it. The commander's jaw tightened. "You disobeyed a direct order." The ghost said nothing. His rifle rested steady in his hands. Muzzle still pointed toward the ridges, as though he expected more. "Damn it, Ghost," Harlan muttered under his breath. "You don't call the shots out here." "I do." But the teen's eyes betrayed the truth. They weren't angry. They weren't even conflicted. They were alive. And they all knew why. The ghost finally blinked, just once, then returned to his scope. He didn't need to defend himself. He didn't need to explain. The battlefield had already done that for him. The radio crackled softly. Overhead, a drone reported no further movement detected. The valley was quiet again. But the ghost didn't move, didn't relax. He stayed still, watching, waiting, certain that the silence wasn't safety. The others shifted behind cover, checking magazines, sipping water, whispering half-jokes to bleed off tension. But they kept stealing glances at him. It was then that Ramirez whispered the phrase again, half in awe. "Who's firing?" "From where?" No one answered, because they already knew. A shot still echoed off the valley walls when silence rolled back over the battlefield. For a moment, the SEALs didn't move, hardly dared to breathe. Then, one by one, they looked at each other, their expressions a mixture of relief, disbelief, and unease. Two enemy snipers had fallen in minutes, both by the same hand. The ghost lay prone, his rifle steady, his gaze still welded to the ridgeline. He hadn't shifted an inch, hadn't sought acknowledgement. The team felt as though they were watching a predator in its natural state, too focused to notice anything beyond the kill. Commander Harlan finally broke the silence. "Ghost," he snapped, his voice low but sharp. "You just disobeyed a direct order." The words cut across the comms like a whip. Every man heard them. Every man stiffened. The sniper didn't answer. His cheek was still pressed against the stock of his rifle, eyes scanning through the scope, steady, deliberate. "Damn it," Harlan muttered, crouching low to scuttle behind a rock near him. Dust clung to his fatigues, sweat streaking down his temple. He leaned in close, voice harder now. "You don't fire unless I give the order. You hear me? I don't care if you think you see God himself in your crosshairs. You wait." Finally, the ghost shifted. Slowly, he pulled his head away from the scope and turned his eyes on Harlan. For a heartbeat, the commander felt a chill. Those eyes weren't insubordinate, weren't rebellious in the way he'd expected. They were calm, detached, like a surgeon explaining to a patient why anesthesia was necessary before cutting. "Orders won't keep them alive," the ghost said softly. His voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried more weight than a shout. Harlan's jaw locked. He wanted to retort, to remind this man of the chain of command, of discipline, of the fragile glue that kept units like theirs from falling apart in the chaos of war. But another crack of gunfire cut the moment short. The round screamed past their position, slamming into the rock face and spraying both men with stone shards. Ramirez cursed and ducked lower. Contact. Another shooter. Torres barked, his voice strained. Harlan's head snapped toward the ridgeline. How many of these bastards are there? The ghost had already returned to his scope, the brief exchange forgotten. His breathing slowed again, each inhale measured. No movement on drone. The voice of the operator buzzed faintly through their coms. Thermal's not picking anything up. Be advised, you're still painted. The team flattened even more, pressed into the unforgiving rock. The ambush wasn't over. It was worse than they thought. This is a coordinated kill zone, Harlan muttered to himself. Rounds cracked again, ricocheting dangerously close. The SEALs shifted desperately behind their minimal cover. Every movement was calculated in inches. They were pinned, and pinned men died if something didn't change. The ghost shifted slightly, aligning his rifle toward the far ridge. His body language told the story before his finger even brushed the trigger. He'd found another angle. Don't you dare, Harlan snapped, slamming a hand against his arm. The sniper's eye stayed locked to the scope. 300 meters. Right ridge. 2 degrees east of the boulder split. He's adjusting his scope. You have 10 seconds before the next shot. Harlan blinked. The ghost spoke like a weatherman reading the forecast. Cold, clinical, certain. I said stand down. The ghost's reply was almost a whisper, but it was enough. If I do, one of yours dies. Another round cracked across the valley. Kowalski yelped, ducking as fragments of his cover chipped away. His breathing came hard and fast into the coms, betraying the panic clawing at him. Harlan's instincts screamed to maintain control, to clamp down, to preserve the command structure. But survival clawed louder. The ghost's finger curled on the trigger, smooth and sure. His breathing hit that steady rhythm again, the rhythm that came just before death. The rifle barked. A sharp cry echoed faintly from the ridge, followed by the hollow clatter of metal on stone. The gunfire stopped. Silence fell again. The SEALs exhaled as one. Relief washed over them, thin and fleeting, but real. Harlan gritted his teeth, his anger rising even as his heart grudgingly admitted the truth. The ghost was right. If he'd held him back, one of his men would now be bleeding in the dirt. The ghost lowered his rifle slightly, scanning once more across the ridge before sliding back into stillness. He didn't gloat. He didn't explain. He just returned to his vigil. Ramirez's voice came low, half in awe. That's 3 in minutes. He's not missing. Torres gave a low whistle, shaking his head. Hell, he ain't human. Cut the chatter, Harlan growled. But his own voice had lost some of its edge. The ghost finally turned toward him again, speaking in that same measured tone. Orders matter. Until they don't. Out here, hesitation kills. The words weren't boastful. They were flat. A fact of war, stripped of ego. Harlan wanted to push back, wanted to slam his authority into the dirt and remind everyone who led this mission. But the faces of his men stopped him. They weren't looking at him with defiance. They were looking at the ghost with something closer to trust-grudging, uncertain, but undeniable. The chain of command had cracked. And in that fracture, something dangerous had taken root. Faith in a man who answered to no one but the battlefield itself. The valley was quiet again, but it wasn't over. The ghost stayed on his scope, motionless. He knew, with the same instinct that guided every shot, that more eyes were out there, watching, waiting, and when they fired, he would fire back. Orders or not. The valley held stillness for barely 5 minutes. 5 minutes where the seals dared to believe the worst was over. They reloaded quietly, checked gear, and whispered half-sentences that sounded more like prayers than words. Sweat clung to their brows despite the cool morning air. But the ghost didn't move. He lay pressed against the rock, his cheek to the rifle stock, eyes behind glass, body fused to the ground like stone. He hadn't exhaled relief. He hadn't blinked at the silence. He was waiting. And then it came. The first shot of the second ambush slammed into the rocks directly above Torres, showering him in debris. He cursed, rolling tighter into cover. Before he could even breathe, 3 more cracks followed, each from a different angle. Multiple shooters. Ramirez yelled. The valley exploded with chaos. Muzzle flashes flickered along ridges like lightning. Bullets screamed through the air, biting into dirt and stone. The seals flattened themselves against the earth, pinned tighter than before. This wasn't a lone sniper. This was a coordinated kill box. Stay down. Harlan barked. His voice fought to stay steady, but strain cracked at the edges. Find cover, eyes up. It was useless. Every angle they looked at had death waiting. A round clipped Kowalski's pack, tearing fabric, spinning him half sideways. He hit the ground with a grunt, clutching his rifle. Another bullet hissed over Ramirez's helmet, so close he swore he felt the heat. Where the hell are they? Torres spat, fury rising with panic. Who's firing? From where? A phrase had become a desperate chorus. But not for the ghost. His scope swept ridges as fast as his heartbeat slowed. He didn't look frantic. He looked serene. To him, the storm of gunfire was noise, a distraction meant for men less patient, less attuned. He tracked movement others couldn't see, the faint silhouette shifting behind a rock, the unnatural stillness of a bush concealing a rifle, the subtle puff of dust stirred by the recoil of a weapon. The commander's voice snapped over comms. Hold position. Don't expose yourselves. The ghost ignored him. He slid higher along the rock face, body flattening to shadows, moving with eerie fluidity. His hands never shook, his breathing never faltered. He set his rifle against the ground, adjusted the scope, and waited for a half-second window. There, a flash. The ghost fired. A scream echoed faintly across the valley, followed by the clatter of a weapon bouncing down rock. One shooter down. But the valley roared back in fury. Another hail of rounds raked their position, shooing into the earth around them. It was like swatting a hornet and enraging the hive. 3 more at least. Ramirez barked, voice strained. Torres slammed his fist against the dirt. We're not getting out of here. The commander cut him off sharply. Shut it and stay low. The ghost didn't flinch. He shifted his rifle, adjusted his scope, found another flicker of motion, just the tip of a barrel protruding where it shouldn't. He squeezed. Another shot barked. Another silence followed. 2 down, he muttered, voice calm as ever. The seals stared, still pinned, but their wide eyes spoke volumes. The valley retaliated again. Another shooter unleashed rounds from higher ground, forcing Harlan and Ramirez flat. Stone splinters bit into exposed skin. The ghost slid once more, exposing himself deliberately to gain angle. Get back in cover. Harlan hissed, grabbing for him. The ghost shrugged the grip off, without looking. His focus was absolute. He fired once, then twice. Both shots rang true. Silence rolled across the ridges. 4 bodies now lay hidden among rocks, unseen but no longer deadly. For a moment, only the sound of their own ragged breathing filled the comms. Dust hung in the air like a curtain. Torres finally broke it, whispering low, "What the hell is he?" The ghost still didn't answer. He never did. He adjusted his rifle, scanning, scanning, scanning. To him, silence was never safety. It was always a trick, a pause between predators. The commander leaned against the rock, chest heaving. His eyes flicked to the ghost, torn between anger and awe. "You disobeyed again," he growled, voice quiet but sharp. The sniper's cheek never lifted from the stock. His finger rested steady on the trigger guard. "And you're still alive." Harlan's breath caught for a moment, anger faltering. The words weren't boastful. They weren't insubordinate. They were flat, factual. The kind of truth men hated because they couldn't deny it. The SEALs whispered among themselves, voices hushed but reverent. Who's firing? From where? It no longer sounded like panic. It sounded like ritual, like respect. The ghost remained still, the valley reflected in his scope, his expression unreadable. The second wave had come like a storm meant to drown them. And somehow, impossibly, the ghost had parted the flood. But he knew what the others didn't. Storms don't end in silence. They gather again. And when the next one broke, he would be ready. The smoke of battle lingered in the valley like a curse. Dust hung in the air, refusing to settle, as if the earth itself had been scarred too deeply to calm. The SEALs crouched low in their cover, hearts pounding, ears ringing from the barrage that had nearly ended them. Their breaths came ragged, shallow, like men surfacing after nearly drowning. But through it all, the ghost remained motionless. His rifle was still fixed to his shoulder, his scope sweeping the ridges in silent arcs. He hadn't fired for almost a full minute, but every man in the squad felt the pressure in his stillness. It was like being near a coiled serpent, quiet, but deadly at any second. Commander Harlan shifted uncomfortably against the rock. His throat was dry, his hands slick with sweat despite the chill in the valley air. He looked at his men, Torres still gripping his weapon too tightly, Kowalski pale and wide-eyed, Ramirez sucking air through clenched teeth. They were alive, all of them. Alive because of the man beside him. But that truth sat in Harlan's stomach like a stone. "Check ammo," Harlan ordered at last, his voice more gravel than steel. The men obeyed, fumbling with magazines, muttering their counts. Supplies were running low, too low for comfort. "They're not done," the ghost whispered suddenly. His voice slid through the comms like mist. "Those weren't all of them." Torres swore softly. "How many more can there be? They had us boxed in from every damn side." "More than you think," the ghost answered, tone flat. "This valley's a graveyard if we stay pinned." The words sent a chill through them, not just because they sounded true, but because of who said them. The ghost wasn't given to exaggeration. Harlan clenched his jaw. "We move in 5. Find higher ground. We can't sit here waiting for the next volley." It sounded like confidence, like leadership, but he knew, they all knew, that without the sniper, they wouldn't have survived the last assault. And still, Harlan struggled to meet his eye. "Ghost," Harlan said finally, low enough so only he could hear. "You'll have to take point." The sniper didn't nod, didn't look at him. He just slid his body lower to the dirt, scanning, scanning. For him, the valley hadn't gone quiet. It was still alive with movement unseen. When they finally moved, it was like shadows creeping uphill. The team advanced in a staggered crawl, hugging stone, ducking into shallow trenches, moving in bursts of silence. Every footstep felt like thunder. Every breath was a betrayal. A ghost led without leading. He never gestured, never spoke. But wherever he went, they followed, as if pulled by a current. His rifle swept ridges like a lighthouse beam, cutting through fog, and somehow Impossibly, the path he chose seemed safer than any other. Minutes bled together. The teen inched forward, sweat stinging their eyes, lungs burning. Twice, Kowalski stumbled, caught himself, almost exposed his position. Each time, the ghost's hand shot out, steadying him without a word. The young SEAL started looking at him differently, less like a soldier, more like something untouchable, a presence you obeyed without question. Then came the discovery. A hollow beneath the rocks, blackened by smoke and torn by shrapnel. Inside, a makeshift sniper's nest. The SEALs fanned out cautiously, weapons ready, but the nest was already silent. A body slumped against the wall, rifle cracked in half, scope shattered. One of the ghost's kills. The blood was fresh, still dark, the rifleman's hand curled around nothing. Ramirez exhaled hard. That's one of them. Jesus, clean shot. They found another nest 50 meters higher. And another. Each one marked by the same invisible hand. Bodies frozen mid-motion, rifles silenced forever. The ghost paused only long enough to confirm the kill, then moved on. No gloating. No satisfaction. Just silence. The men followed through the carnage with hushed awe. Torres finally muttered what they were all thinking. He killed them before we even knew they were there. Kowalski swallowed hard. Saved us. Every damn one of us. Harlan said nothing. His silence was louder than any praise. The path led higher, the ridges opening to a narrow plateau overlooking the valley. The SEALs crept into position, finally breathing without the constant sting of incoming fire. For the first time since dawn, they weren't prey. They had elevation, perspective. The ghost lay prone at the edge, scanning the endless expanse of ridges, his rifle's eye stretching further than any human sight could. Below, the valley lay scarred and still, empty, or so it seemed. They're regrouping, the ghost whispered. Torres cursed under his breath. You can't know that. The sniper's voice was colder this time, unyielding. I know. The commander finally crouched beside him, staring out over the broken terrain. His pride gnawed at him, but his survival, his men's survival, tore it apart. Then tell me, Harlan said at last. What do we do? The words weren't loud, but the team heard them. Every man froze, realizing what had just been spoken. Their commander unyielding, iron-willed Harlan had asked the ghost for guidance. The sniper didn't answer right away. His scope swept the horizon, steady, patient. When he spoke, it was like prophecy. We set the trap. They'll come again. This time, we're waiting. The team exchanged wary glances. It went against every instinct to sit and wait for the enemy, but not one man dared to argue. Not now. The ghost remained on his rifle, the valley reflected in his glass eye. He had become more than just a man to them. He was the line between life and death, and his shadow stretched longer with every shot he fired. The ridge was a knife's edge above the valley. Below, the world stretched in broken folds of rock and dust, a landscape carved by centuries of wind and war. The SEALs crouched low along the plateau, their silhouettes blending into stone and shadow. For the first time since the mission began, they weren't scrambling to survive. They were waiting. The ghost's idea had unsettled them at first. Waiting for an enemy to strike was a soldier's nightmare. But when he spoke, his voice was too certain to ignore. They'll come again, he had said. They won't leave until we're dead. We make them believe they still have the advantage. And we cut them down. And so the team prepared, scattering into positions along the ridge, every man armed, scopes aligned with the valley below. But it wasn't their eyes the plan depended on. It was his. The ghost lay prone at the plateau's edge, his rifle braced, scope glinting faintly in the dim light. His body seemed carved from stone, unmoving, only his slow breaths giving proof of life. The men gave him space, watching from the corners of their eyes, but never interrupting his vigil. They had all learned by now, when he stared through glass, he wasn't guessing. He was seeing. Minutes stretched. Silence grew heavy, like a weight pressing down on their backs. The wind stirred dust devils across the valley floor. Somewhere far off, a hawk circled. The seal's nerves frayed under the strain. Ramirez whispered, "What if they've already pulled back?" Torres shook his head. "You saw what they threw at us. They don't quit. They'll come." Still, the silence gnawed at them. Each second felt like a wire pulled tighter. Then the ghost exhaled through his nose. A sound so faint it was almost lost. Movement. East Ridge. 400 meters. Every man froze. Their rifles swung toward the direction he named, but none of them saw it. Not at first. To them, the rocks looked still, empty. "There," the ghost murmured. "2, no, 3. They're crawling low." The commander narrowed his eyes, following the sniper's scope with his binoculars. Then faint, almost imperceptible, he saw it. The flicker of cloth where only stone should be. The subtle rise of dust disturbed by elbows dragging across earth. Harlan's chest tightened. He turned to his men. "He's right. Get ready." More shapes emerged as the ghost whispered their positions. A shadow behind a boulder, a barrel nudging forward, the faint shimmer of heat rising from a scope in the sun. Enemy snipers, patient and lethal, closing in with the precision of wolves. The SEALs felt their throats go dry. "How many?" Kowalski asked, voice barely audible. The ghost's eye didn't move from the scope. Too many. The trap had been set. Now it was about timing. The first enemy shot cracked, aimed not to kill, but to test. It struck the rocks far short of Ramirez's cover, echoing like thunder in the valley. Immediately, the air tightened. The game was on. The ghost didn't return fire. Not yet. Another shot followed, then another, closing tighter to their positions. Dirt spit into their faces. Kowalski flinched as a round clipped the edge of his rock, showering him with splinters. "Hold," Harlan hissed through gritted teeth. His hands shook as he gripped his rifle. "We fire on my mark." The ghost cut him off. Not yet. The commander's head snapped toward him, fury flashing. But then he caught the look in the sniper's eye, calm, unshakable. The kind of calm men only had when they knew. Another enemy shot rang. Closer. Too close. And then the ghost's finger tightened. His rifle barked once. A figure toppled from the rocks below, tumbling into the dust with a cry. Before the echo even died, the ghost fired again. Another. Another. 4 shots in less than 10 seconds. Each one precise. Each one final. The valley erupted. Enemy fire poured upward, wild and furious, streaking into the ridge. The SEALs flattened themselves, returning fire in bursts. Tracers screamed through the air, striking sparks off stone. The plateau became a storm of lead and dust. Torres shouted over the chaos, "We're lit up." Too many angles. "Stay sharp." Harlan barked, but his voice was drowned by the sheer volume of gunfire. The ghost didn't shout. He didn't move. His rifle cracked rhythmically, a steady drumbeat amid the chaos. Wherever he aimed, silence followed. 2 more down, Ramirez reported, disbelief in his tone. 300 meters, left ridge, the ghost whispered, squeezing off another round. A faint scream answered him. But the enemy was relentless. They kept coming, replacing every fallen man with 2 more. Bullets chewed at the ridge, stones exploding into deadly shards. A fragment, tore across Torres's cheek, leaving a bloody streak. Kowalski cried out as a round punched through his pack, narrowly missing his spine. "We can't hold this." Torres roared. The ghost shifted slightly, still calm. "Yes, we can." Harlan crawled toward him through dust and fire. "They're pinning us again." "We'll get overrun." "No," the ghost interrupted. His eye never left the scope. "They don't know how many of us are here. They're guessing. We make them believe we're more. Spread fire. Different angles. Confuse them." Harlan blinked, stunned at the clarity under fire. Then he shouted into Combs, "You heard him." Fire from new positions. 3-second bursts. The SEALs obeyed, shifting and staggering their fire, making their squad sound like a small army. Bullets sprayed in disciplined bursts, cutting echoes across the valley. The enemy hesitated, just for a moment. But hesitation was all the ghost needed. He picked them off one by one, his shots cutting through the chaos like a scalpel. Still, the fight dragged on. Minutes bled like hours. Sweat and blood mingled on their skin, the taste of dust clogging their mouths. Their ammo counts dwindled dangerously. Finally, silence fell. No more muzzle flashes. No more incoming rounds. The valley lay still, except for the ringing in their ears and the faint groans of wind through the rocks. The SEALs sagged against their cover, chests heaving, hearts thundering. "Clear?" Ramirez whispered, unwilling to believe it. The ghost stayed on his scope, motionless. 10 long seconds passed before he finally exhaled. For now. The men exchanged looks of awe, fear, and gratitude all at once. The ghost had once again turned slaughter into survival. But none of them missed the way he spoke for now. They all knew it wasn't finished. The enemy wasn't gone. They were regrouping, rethinking. The deadliest battle was still to come. And the ghost would be waiting. The valley was quiet. Too quiet. The SEALs crouched along the plateau, bodies tense, rifles ready. They had survived the second wave, but the ghost had warned them for now. They all knew the enemy had retreated only to regroup, to strike again with more precision, more fury. Harlan scanned the valley below, heart still hammering in his chest. The bodies of enemy snipers lay scattered among the rocks, reminders of the ghost's lethality. But he could feel that something was coming. He turned to his men, his jaw tight. "Stay sharp. They'll return." The ghost didn't speak. He was prone at the edge of the plateau, scope trained on the valley floor, eyes cold and unblinking. His body was carved from stone, breathing shallow, fingers on the trigger like a pianist poised for the final note. The men had stopped glancing at him. They didn't need to. Every instinct they had told them that he was the line between life and death. Then it began. A distant crack, a subtle movement. The enemy emerged from cover and disciplined formation. Shadows crawling across the rocks, rifles raised, advancing in calculated waves. They had learned from the last ambush. They were faster, smarter, and deadly. "Here they come," Torres muttered, voice tight with fear and awe. The first shots tore through the air, aimed to pin and provoke. Bullets whined past rocks and bodies, tearing the earth apart. The SEALs returned fire in short, disciplined bursts, trying to mimic the ghost's calm efficiency. But the valley was endless, and the enemy was relentless. The ghost fired first, his rifle a crack of inevitability. One sniper down, another. Each shot precise, surgical, leaving the enemy no chance to respond. Harlan tried to maintain order, shouting commands through dust and smoke, but the battlefield had become a storm that ignored protocol. Every man relied on instinct, training, and the ghost. The enemy adapted. They spread, flanking from both sides, sending volleys of rounds that shredded cover and scattered dust into the seal's eyes. Torres screamed as a round grazed his shoulder. Kowalski cursed, clutching his thigh as shrapnel tore through his back. Ramirez's rifle kicked in his hands as he fired blindly over cover. But the ghost remained still, eyes glued to the scope, scanning, calculating, anticipating. Left ridge, 4 o'clock. 3 movement, he whispered into comms, soft but audible. 1, 2. Wait. The shots rang out, each one precise, each one fatal. The enemy faltered. Hesitation spread through their ranks like a virus. And in that split second, the ghost seized control. He fired again and again, dismantling their formation, turning chaos into calculated slaughter. His rifle barked like a beast, each round a death sentence. The SEALs took his lead, following his calculated timing, covering angles he pointed out, firing in rhythm with his strikes. Minutes stretched. The valley became a tableau of smoke, dust, and bodies. The air trembled with the echo of gunfire, the acrid sting of spent gunpowder filling every nostril. Men moved like shadows, crouched behind rocks, hearts pounding, following the rhythm set by the ghost. Then came the moment Harlan had feared the most. A sniper appeared from a hidden crevice high above, muzzle flashing with deadly intent. The round struck near Ramirez, throwing him to the ground. Another hit near Torres. Panic threatened to break the team. Ghost. Harlan shouted, urgency cutting through the chaos. The sniper didn't hesitate. With a single fluid motion, he adjusted his scope, calculated distance, wind, and target, and fired. The shot was perfect, precise, and final. The enemy sniper's body collapsed, rolling down the rocks, rifle tumbling after him. As SEALs blinked, mouths open. Another wave of horror avoided. Another life saved. The ghost didn't move, didn't celebrate, didn't breathe easier. He simply scanned the valley again, waiting for the final threat. And it came. A small group. The last of the ambush team surged from the shadows, firing indiscriminately, desperate. They were close, closer than any had dared to be before. Harlan realized with a sinking heart, if these men reached them, the plateau would become a death trap. Hold the line. Harlan screamed. The ghost's finger curled. His breathing slowed further, almost imperceptible. He picked off one enemy, then another, then a third. Each shot unerring, surgical, almost inhuman in precision. The final enemy hesitated, realizing the predator in front of them was unstoppable. The last rifle cracked once, then the valley was still. The SEALs exhaled collectively. Bodies littered the rocks, smoke curled from spent cartridges, and the air trembled with adrenaline. Every man alive, every man saved. Torres finally spoke, voice raw. He saved us all. Ramirez nodded, unable to move from where he crouched. Every single one. Harlan looked at the ghost, finally, truly seeing him. There was no arrogance in his eyes, no satisfaction, just vigilance, just certainty. The battle was over, but the war had left its mark on him, carved into the stillness of his face. Ghost, Harlan said quietly, almost reverently, you saved us. All of us. The sniper didn't respond immediately. He lay prone, scanning the valley one last time, then finally lowered the rifle. His voice, when it came, was calm, flat. They'll regroup, they always do, but not today. The SEALs slowly stood, unsteady, bruised, and exhausted. They looked over the valley, at the carnage left behind, at the deadly precision that had kept them alive. Gratitude, awe, and disbelief mingled in the air like smoke. Torres finally laughed, soft and incredulous. Who's firing? From where? We've been asking that all day. And now we know. The ghost didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. But there was a subtle nod, almost imperceptible, acknowledging the survival of the men he protected. Harlan approached him carefully, finally letting his anger dissolve into something else: respect. You ignored my orders. More than once. You saved every one of us. I don't know what to say. The ghost's eyes met his briefly. Orders don't matter when people die waiting for them. You'll remember that next time. Harlan nodded. Not just as a commander, but as a man who had just witnessed something extraordinary. The ghost had become more than legend. He was a guardian, a shadow in the valley, a force that moved beyond the rules of war. The SEALs gathered themselves, tending wounds, checking ammo, and surveying the valley. Every man alive, every man intact. A rare victory in a place carved by death. And through it all, the ghost remained. Watching, waiting, silent. No one knew his real name. No one needed to. Today, he was the reason they lived. As the sun climbed higher, bathing the valley in pale light, the SEALs finally began to descend, carrying their wounded and the weight of the day with them. The ghost stayed atop the plateau, a lone figure against rock and sky, eyes sweeping the horizon. Somewhere, in the shadows, enemies still moved. But the ghost had left his mark. Every step, every shot, every life saved whispered through the rocks. He was there, and they would never see him coming.